Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Genevieve Kessler, and I am the Director of State Advocacy with the IRC and the State Strategic Lead with the Refugee Advocacy Lab. The lab is an initiative that's co-led by Refugees International, the International Rescue Committee, Refugee Congress, and the International Refugee Assistance Project. The lab works to advance the movement for U.S. leadership on refugee protection and inclusion. It does so by developing strategic communications, resources, championing inclusive state policies, and building the field for new partnerships and refugee leadership development. I'll be your host and your moderator for our training today. Today is the first in a series of learning opportunities to share best practices across states. We've been very excited for today's training. With the rapid arrival of Afghan families following the fall of Kabul last year, many school districts across the country raced to scale up and prepare to serve these children. Unfortunately, though, we also heard about enrollment challenges that families faced, a lack of clarity over obligations and requirements for student enrollment, or even outright refusal in some cases. We also, though, heard stories about school districts and staff who met the moment, considering new and unique programs and even going to temporary housing facilities to start working with these families prior to enrollment. I'm so grateful to our speakers today who will address both of these points. We have with us on the agenda, starting with Bryan Thurmond with the Office of School Support and Accountability at the U.S. Department of Education. We have Kelly Alvarez following after, who's the Title III program consultant with the Michigan Department of Education. And then we will be hearing from Rebecca Ibarra, who is the Education Equality Associate Director with Granite School District in Utah. Though I know many of us are very familiar with Zoom at this point, please note that today's setup is as a webinar format. So if you would like to ask questions of our presenters, please submit that through the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We will address questions after the presenters have finished and the recording of the presentations has ended. If you cannot stay on for the full presentation or would like to review the information afterwards, we will share the link for the recording along with any of the content that you're viewing today. And with that, I will turn things over to our first speaker, Bryan Thurmond with the Department of Education.
Great, thanks, Genevieve. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen quickly here. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you today. My name is Bryan Thurmond, and I work at the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. And in that office, I have the privilege of being one of our program officers for our two programs designed to support the needs of students experiencing homelessness. I'm excited today to tell you a little bit about our programs, give you an overview of the program's services that students who qualify are entitled to. And I'm going to spend the bulk of my time today talking about the eligibility requirements for these programs, and most specifically how students who are refugees or evacuees might qualify for services under the programs. I won't bury the lead, however, and so I'll say right out front here that it is possible that sometimes students who are evacuees could qualify or be eligible for services under these programs. And I'll talk a little bit more about the eligibility criteria a little bit later in the presentation. I should also say that I'm framing today's conversation around students who are evacuees, and in particular, Afghan evacuee students. But it's important to note that the eligibility criteria that I'm going to discuss really do apply to students regardless of their immigrant status. So first up, before I dive in, I just want to acknowledge that I am part of a small but mighty team of program officers here at the department that work on this program. So while I'm going to be the presenter today on this webinar, I certainly am joined in spirit by my colleagues Heather, Sophie, and John. And in fact, I should say that John is actually on the line for today's webinar, so you might hear from him in the chat over the course of my remarks, and he might also come off mute and join us for Q&A at the end of today's session. John is a wonderful colleague, and in fact, he is our team lead for these programs and has been with them for well over 10 years and might even be barreling toward that 15-year mark. So he's really a subject matter expert here. If you want to get in contact with any of us, I would encourage you to shoot us an email at homelessed@ed.gov. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have, provide you with any resources about our programs, and even connect you to folks at the state or local level who might be of assistance. So with that in mind, I'm going to dive right in here and give an overview of our two programs for students experiencing homelessness. And first up, we have the Education for Homeless Children and Youth, or EHCY grant program. Of our two programs, I like to refer to this one as our legacy program because it has been around since 1987 and has, evolved over the past 3+ decades. This program was most recently reauthorized under Title VII-B of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act, and that was back in 2015. You can see here that this program, its annual appropriation for FY22 was approximately $114 million. And we've seen over the past decade plus a steady year-over-year increase in our annual appropriation. Similarly, we've seen an increase in the number of students enrolled, the number of students who have been identified as homeless over the course of the school year. So you can see here that I've included a data point from school year 1920, which is the school year for which we have the most recent available information. And in that school year, just shy of 1.3 million students were identified as experiencing homelessness at some point during that school year. So that's just a quick overview of the EHCY program, our legacy program. If you want to learn a little bit more, I would encourage you to access the program profile that you see here on your screen. It does a much better job than I do of walking through some of the legislative history of the program, giving you a broad strokes overview of some of the requirements of the program, and it even disaggregates some of the student data to give you a better picture of the students that we serve through the program. Next up, we have our other program, the ARP-HCY grant program. And if the EHCY program is our legacy program, the ARP-HCY program is really the new kid on the block. ARP-HCY stands for the American Rescue Plan Homeless Children and Youth Program. And as you might surmise from the title of the program, this program was stood up just last year as a result of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Through the American Rescue Plan Act, Congress actually carved out $800 million to specifically address the unique impact that the pandemic has had on students experiencing homelessness. And in carving out this appropriation, Congress really charged us, that's us at the federal, state, and local level, with 3 key activities. First, we're charged with using these funds for identifying and increasing the identification of students experiencing homelessness. Second, we're charged with using these funds to provide wraparound services to these identified students. And then lastly, we're charged with using these funds to ensure that students who are identified are able to consistently attend and succeed in school. I just want to underscore sort of the level of funding for this program at $800 million. This was, roughly 7 times the legacy program, the EHCY program's annual appropriation. So this really is an unprecedented amount of funds that have been obligated now, or appropriated rather, to support the student population. And so it's really been an honor and really exciting to help launch this program and push these funds out to states, because we have a really great opportunity now to meet this moment and to serve students. From this point, I want to just acknowledge that for all intents and purposes, while the EHCY program and the ARP-HCY program are distinct, they have distinct statutes, they have distinct funding streams. The way that we identify students as eligible for both of these programs is identical, and in large part, the appropriate uses of funds under these different programs are identical. So for the purposes of today's conversation, I'm going to talk about EHCY and ARP-HCY as one collective program. They are distinct, but that just makes it a little easier for today's conversation. So now that I've given a pretty quick overview of the programs and sort of their funding structures, I want to zoom in a little bit and provide a little bit more context about the objectives and goals of these programs and the rights that eligible students are entitled to under them. So first, it's important to note that the McKinney-Vento Act, which was the act that established our legacy EHCY program, sets out a definition for homeless children and youth. And we use that definition to determine eligibility for the program, both programs. I'll talk about the eligibility requirements and that definition in the next couple of slides. At their most basic level, these programs are really designed to address the challenges that students experiencing homelessness typically encounter when they attempt to enroll in, continually attend, and succeed in school. And under these programs, when students are identified as eligible, they're entitled to a whole host of rights. And while there are many more rights and services that they're entitled to than I could list on this slide, I've tried to bucket them in to a couple of overarching categories. So first, when students are eligible for services, they have the right to immediate school enrollment, even when they don't have the records that are typically required for enrollment in school. So those records might include records such as vaccination records or records from the previous school that they attended. These students, when they're eligible, also have the right to remain at their school of origin if it's determined that it's in their best interest to remain at that school of origin. And by school of origin, I mean the school that the student was attending at the time that they first became homeless. Next, the student has the right to receive transportation to and from their school of origin if it's in their best interest to remain at that school of origin. And those two rights really are about trying to maintain school stability to the extent feasible. We know that students experiencing homelessness are a highly mobile student population. And so these two services or rights are really designed to try to minimize to the extent possible the number of school placement changes that a student would experience. And then finally, that last bucket is really the right to receive all kinds of academic supports and services to ensure academic outcomes for these students. Finally, I should note that because every state receives an EHCY subgrant from us, they are required to establish within each state an office of the coordinator for the education of homeless children and youth. And within that office, each state has a state coordinator for homeless education who's charged with implementing the program statewide and supporting local practitioners as they identify and provide services to students. And those local practitioners are known as local liaisons. So the local liaisons work with school-based staff. Their local liaisons are school district-based staff. They work in turn with school-based staff within the district to identify students, provide them with services, and also to connect those students and their families to other community organizations that could provide those wraparound services that families in crisis might need. Okay. So with all of that out of the way, the kind of overview there, I'm going to zoom in even further, and I want to talk about the eligibility requirements for students who might need access to some of these services. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, the McKinney-Vento Act lays out a definition for homeless children and youth. And this definition is used as the eligibility criteria for students. I've sort of listed here a truncated, slightly abbreviated version of the definition, but I've bolded and underscored what I see as the most important piece of this definition right in the top line. And so a student is eligible if they lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Fixed, regular, and adequate. Those are really the key pieces that we look for. And then the bulleted items that you see under that introductory phrase are parts of the definition that really lay out examples of when living situations or housing situations would meet that standard of lacking a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So I won't read through each of these, but I hope as you look through these bullets, you're able to see that our definition of homeless children and youth is actually quite expansive and is maybe more expansive than we colloquially understand the term homeless to mean. So we have in the the fourth or fifth bullets there on the list, sort of those types of living situations that might qualify as unsheltered homelessness, so living in a public or private space, living in a car, park, abandoned building, etc. But we also have in the first and second bullets here what I think are maybe a little bit more expansive in our definition. So in the second bullet, for example, if a student is living in a motel, hotel, trailer park, or campground because they don't have access to an alternative adequate accommodation, that could rise and likely would rise to the standard of lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime resident, making that student eligible for services under our program. Similarly, in that first bullet, you can see that a student who's sharing the housing of another because they've lost their housing or they've experienced some sort of economic hardship, that could also rise to that standard of lacking the fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime resident, making that student eligible for services. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention and draw your attention down to that box at the bottom of the slide here. It's really important to note that these eligibility determinations really are context specific. And because of that, they really have to be made on a case-by-case basis. And so it's really the job of those local practitioners, usually the local liaison working with school-based staff like school registrars, school social workers, school counselors. It's really their job to make these eligibility determinations. So for this reason, we don't have bright line rules at the federal level that all students in X housing situation are eligible for program services and or all students in Y housing situation are ineligible for services. It really is a case-by-case basis. In addition to that overarching definition of homeless children and youth, we also have in our McKinney-Vento Act a definition of unaccompanied homeless youth. And I want to just draw your attention to this for a second. An unaccompanied homeless youth is a homeless child or youth who is lacking that fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence that we talked about on the previous slide. And that youth is not in the physical custody of a legal parent or guardian. This is an important distinction because unaccompanied homeless youth have additional specific rights available to them under the McKinney-Vento Act or under our programs. So for instance, while all students who are eligible for services, all students who meet that definition have the right to immediate school enrollment, even if they lack those records typically required for enrollment, unaccompanied homeless youth can immediately enroll in school, even without parent or guardian signature on those enrollment forms. Similarly, unaccompanied homeless youth have the right to work closely with local liaisons and other local practitioners to be informed about their rights and the services guaranteed to them under the statute. I would also note that while some youth are sometimes under the care of other adults, like an older sibling, maybe a grandparent, maybe an adult family friend, if that adult who's providing care for that youth is not the legal parent or guardian, that youth could still qualify as an unaccompanied homeless youth under this definition. That was a quick overview of the unaccompanied homeless youth definition and sort of the rights, the unique rights that they're guaranteed. So if you want to learn more, I would direct you to the brief that I've linked to here at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so now I want to zoom in even further and talk a little bit about how these eligibility requirements for the EHCY and the ARP-HCY programs sort of overlap and impact students who might be evacuees or immigrants. We released at the department back in February a letter to colleagues across the country that really articulates that students who are evacuees or have evacuee status may be eligible for services under the EHCY and ARP-HCY programs. As I've mentioned on the previous slides, each of these determinations for eligibility truly is fact-specific, context-specific, and must be made on a case-by-case basis. So our letter does not say that all students who have evacuee status are categorically eligible. Instead, the letter encourages state educational agencies and school district staff to coordinate closely with state refugee coordinators and local refugee resettlement affiliates to make those eligibility determinations. So again, the bottom line key takeaway here is that students who are evacuees and have that status certainly could be eligible for services under our programs. And in determining whether they are eligible for services, it's important to look back at the student, or to look back at that definition and consider the student's housing situation rather than their status, immigration status. You can access this ed communication, which is obviously much more detailed than I just was, at the link on your screen. Finally, I want to just note that the department recently launched a website called Keeping the Promise, which really just underscores the department's commitment to ensuring that Afghan evacuees have full access to school opportunities and will be supported and realize their full academic potential. You can see that the website launches with a quote to that effect from Secretary of Education. This website is also really cool because it contains like an index of different resources, some of which are targeted at state practitioners, some are targeted at more local practitioners, and even some of the resources are targeted at students and families themselves. And for those resources that are targeted at students and families, they're available in English as well as other languages, because we want to make sure that language is not a barrier to being able to access this important information. So I would encourage you to take a look at this website and bookmark it. It is updated periodically. And I should say it contains information across all of the department's programming, not just our programs for students experiencing homelessness. Finally, I've given a really quick overview of the eligibility criteria and the process for making those determinations. I wanted to be sure to point out a resource from our National Center for Homeless Education. This is our TA wing. This determining eligibility brief really walks through those criteria in a really methodical way and helps readers understand sort of the decision-making framework that practitioners go through to determine whether students are eligible for services under the EHCY or ARP-HCY program. So I encourage you to check out that brief. Finally, I just wanted to provide some quick links here. So if you're interested in learning more about the HCY or ARP-HCY programs, I've included hyperlinks to our web pages. And I mentioned a moment ago, our National Center for Homeless Education. That's our TA provider for both of these programs. Their website, which is listed here, has a whole host of information about best practices for not only determining eligibility, but also providing services to students. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back over to you, Genevieve.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate all of that helpful information, and we will certainly be sharing out the slides and content that you put together after the fact. Moving along through our agenda, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which will be Kelly Alvarez, who is the Title III Program Consultant with the Michigan Department of Ed. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you so much. I am excited about being able to share the partnership that we have in Michigan with our Office of Global Michigan. So I intentionally put both of our logos on this slide because I think that the intentional collaboration that we've established with the labor, economics, and opportunity kind of portion of our state is really stellar and something I wanted to share with you today. So we began collaborating about 2 years ago or so, and you could advance to the next slide, please. And wanted to just highlight for any of the folks that are in state government kind of the benefits of having what we call Office of Global Michigan, but I think many call like Office of New Americans or something to that nature, as a component of the state. We really, because we have, within the State Department, we are able to collaborate effectively. And there's also, good working relationship with the governor's office. I know from especially the Office of Global Michigan, they have a tight relationship with them that I think that is difficult to establish, outside of the State Department. And for an example, when the news came that we were receiving the Afghan students and families, the Office of Global Michigan really pulled together a task force of many state departments and as well as local agencies, and being able to do that from their position of State Department was really beneficial for the coordination of the effort. And then also being that we are both at the State Department, when we collaborate together, we can kind of speak with one voice to the field on those matters as well, which I think has been a real unique opportunity in Michigan, and a very big recommendation that we would have for other states as well. I know I have quite a few state colleagues that that support English learners on the call, and when I've spoken to many of them, they report to me that not all of the departments are housed in the state, and so that is a unique component. And it also, has helped us kind of deploy resources more effectively as well, because we can have joint meetings. We can create combined guidance, and in our case, support the schools and districts to be more prepared for our students. So, go to the next slide, please. So you might be asking yourself, like, oh my gosh, how do you get this started? Like, who's involved in your team and the collaboration? It's really just 5 of us, actually. It's my manager, so the Special Populations Manager in the Michigan Department of Education, and myself. I'm the English Learner Consultant. And then we have Ben Kavanaugh, who's the manager of the Refugee Resettlement kind of office, and a departmental specialist, Nicole Adams, as well as Jill Pierce, who is here on the call with us as well. We are a small team of 5. We meet monthly or weekly or multiple times per week if needed, depending on what we're working on and what the needs are. We have in the past, just to give you some ideas on the ways that we've collaborated, when we were going through we were receiving the Afghan students, we identified kind of the districts where the students were settling, and that was through collaboration with our school impact providers. And then we went and found points of contact for each of those districts, and hosted monthly meetings with them. We were listening to the field, we were taking in questions, and we had kind of a running Q&A so that we could make sure that everyone was basing out of the same information, and that we were, trying to head off any of the potential pitfalls that were coming along. And we identified, in addition to that, our collaboration has helped us identify pain points, kind of, that families are experiencing when they're enrolling in schools. So an example of that was when our Afghan students were trying to enroll in pre-K, and it was kind of toward the end of the year. Our state-run pre-K programs were saying that they weren't enrolling any new students because it was so late in the year. We were made aware of it. We worked with our pre-K office at the state level, and they were able to find locations for the students to start school right away. So that's just an example of one of like the avenues of communication that really helped families get kids in school. Also, we were made aware that there were districts that when their newcomers were coming into high school, even if they were 17 or 18, they were putting them in 9th grade and not giving them any credits. And so we were able to work directly, through the Department of Education, work directly with the high schools or the districts in question and remedy that situation for the family. So it's really nice to have that communication between the school impact providers, the Office of Global Michigan, and MDE, so that we can make sure that we're, taking care of whatever's coming up for families. So the next. So we've had, stellar communication, really good collaborative working relationship. And we just got news just a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more, about the Afghan refugee school impact allocations that were coming. This funding, as I'm sure all of you know, is quite unique in the fact that it is coming through the Office of Refugee Resettlement and in Michigan through the Office of Global Michigan, but it's destined for school districts. There aren't a lot of funding structure set up to fund districts through our labor economics and opportunities kind of branch of the government. And so we really put our heads together to think about how we could best leverage the funding in service of our schools that received Afghan students, and those that maybe and what kind of secondary benefit we could gain from that. And so we decided to utilize that funding to provide the allocation to ISDs, which are our county offices. We kind of went through the data and looked at where our students had settled, and then decided which were the 6 counties that had the largest populations of over 120 students per county. And then we said that we would hire coaches for each of those counties that would work directly with the newcomers in installing best newcomer programs, coaching teachers to better meet the needs of newcomers. And also these coaches will work collaboratively together. The 6 that will be spread out across the state will work collaboratively together to create better resources and guidance for districts all over the state that are welcoming newcomers. The supports that we collaboratively created were a position description with potential interview questions for these coaches. We provided written expectations regarding what each entity is going to provide. So what the Michigan Department of Education will provide for the coaches, what LEO, or the Labor Economics and Opportunity, the Office of Global Michigan, will provide for the coaches, and then also what we expect the county offices to provide for the coaches. And then we wrote up some assurances to ensure that the funding was used in alignment to what the funding regulations state. And then the last thing that we've done is talk with one of our local universities that has been doing a lot of research and some technical assistance and professional learning on meeting the socio-emotional support for students that are coming from regions of conflict. And so those university professors will be doing intensive training with these 6 coaches so that we can also grow our expertise at the state, across the state, on how best to meet the needs of our students. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we've been working on, and it's been a really successful collaboration between the 2 governmental agencies, and we're hoping to see the fruits of our labor with new coaches. So I'll pass it back to you, Genevieve.
Thank you so much for that, Kelly. I'll move things along to our last and final speaker, Rebecca Ibarra. Again, Rebecca is with the Granite School District in Utah and serves as the Educational Equality Associate Director. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. And it's actually the Educational Equity Department for Granite School District in Salt Lake City, Utah. And thank you so much for having me here today. And I feel very honored to be here with the rest of these speakers. There are great things are happening around the nation, and I'm glad to see that Utah is part of that. What I'm here to talk to you about today is what Granite School District is doing for our refugees and newcomers as they come into our care. So we have our best practices here as the Granite School District leads the country actually in refugee and newcomer student programming and support. We have different programs here that would include the Tumaini Welcome and Transition Center. Now the word Tumaini actually means hope in Swahili. So we have the Tumaini Welcome and Transition Center. I'll go into this. We have the Language Academy hosted at the Cottonwood High School for our refugees and newcoming students. We also have the Jumpstart Summer School program that last day was today. In fact, a 6-week program where we help refugees and newcomer students with credits that either didn't transfer from their home countries or credits that they may be missing towards graduation, or if students just simply want to get ahead. And that's why we call it the Jump Start, looking at getting them the credits beforehand so that possibility of graduating high school early is there for them. And then we also have the Serve Refugees Share House, which is a local donation center that is run in conjunction with the Utah Refugee Connection, where community outreach makes this center available to families of refugees and newcomers, where families can go and pick up either groceries or home supplies, cleaning agents, hygiene kits. We've got coats for every member of the family if they need be, backpacks with school supplies and necessary school items in those backpacks, and those are all available. So those are just the things that we have available, at least for our refugees and newcomers. I'll break that down a little bit here. We have the Tumaini Welcome and Transition Center, which is now currently going under a redevelopment. Our director has decided that rather than put our students as they come in from the IRC and the CCS, other agencies, once we get the notification from them at the school level that we have students moving into the district, we would put them in a centralized location, a school within a school, if you will, that was called the Tumaini Welcome and Transition Center. Those students would remain there for 10 days where they would get some basic English skills and mostly learn the culture, find out about water fountains and how to get a towel dispenser to work when all you have to do is put your hand under it. But unfortunately, a lot of our students don't realize that's how you access a towel. So things like that, and some basic English skills to help them get started for when they do transfer into their home school, meaning their boundary school. This year, we're going to roll out the new improved Tumaini, and it's the Tumaini 2.0 on the go program, where we have our liaisons and other team members that will take our students as they come in. From the agencies, we'll take them and get them directly, immediately placed in their boundary school, working with the teacher, providing resources, providing ideas and tips and other resources and things that will help them facilitate not just the new coming student or the refugee, but all the students in their classroom, because it really is about equity. We want to make our students feel not like they're an additional item that needs to be taken care of, or an add-on or an afterthought, or we want to make sure that they know that that sense of belonging is first and foremost, and they belong in that class with the rest of those students and their classmates, and the teacher as another student in that class, not as a different kind of student, but another student. So we are going to roll that out this year, where we have actually 3 teams. I do have a screen that I can share with you if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that one. Hopefully this will come up okay for you. And it kind of shows the layout that we've put together for our 2.0 Tumaini. We kind of have 3 goals, and that is to support the student in school, to support the student in the classroom, along with the teacher and the classmates, as well as supporting the student and family at home. What can we do to make sure that these families, not just students, but our families get what they need? So looking at this here, phase 1, this would be before even the school starts, before even the student starts the school, where we would contact the family the day before, get all the registration papers taken care of, welcome them in, provide for them any immediate necessities that they may need. We provide an interpreter, of course. We give them information about resources and agency information, where we can pick up any background on the student as far as any allergies for food, or if they don't have the internet, we will provide them with a portable hotspot so that they can do that. We also will get them a Chromebook to be used. We teach them how to access the school portal, where they can keep track of their students' grades or attendance, or We also show them how to translate the web pages, the school web pages, as well as the district web page into their home language, multiple languages. Here in Granite School District, we have over 800 refugees and newcomers in the school district. We have 60,000 students in all total, but we have 800 refugee students in the district, and these refugee students speak over 100 languages. At current, we're at 105 different languages in the district, where we have 90 schools. And our top 10 languages there are Arabic, Swahili, Somali, Dari, Nepali, Kinyarwanda, Karen, Pashto, and Burmese, and of course, Spanish is our second, next to English. So we want to make sure they get access to any bus information for their students. We want to make sure parents get any handouts and resources in their home language. We want to address any teacher concerns and provide the teacher with any background from the student, making sure that they have that background knowledge before the student starts, giving them an opportunity to know the student better, and also to share that information and those cultural traits with the rest of the class, making the student feel immediately welcome to the class. You can see there under phase 2, that there would be like our first day of school and the first couple of days, maybe probably even a week, where our team of 5 members, we have 5, I think we're working on 6 now, members on a team that will actually work with an entire network of schools. We have 3 different networks that we've divided our 8 different school networks into. We've divided them into 3 teams. And each of those teams will be represented with a specialist, 5 of them. And one of them will be our alternative language program director. One will be a compliance coach, making sure all the WIDA testing is done for our students to determine the level of English that they're on. We also will have an academic specialist, which would be a teacher specialist. We also have a Title VI mentor to help with our Native Americans and Alaska Natives who will be part of that team. We also will have a member of our human trafficking department, so that we can train all of our team to the signs to look for as far as human trafficking and labor trafficking goes. And then we are also looking at adding our Spanish interpreters, because we do have 3 of those currently that we're rolling over from last year. We're going to put them to good use here on these teams. So these teams will consist of about 5 or 6 people, and each team will have a stream of students or network schools that they will be responsible for. And so as we get a new student from the IRC or the CCS, any other agency, we get that name, we take it to the team takes it from there and do all of this background stuff. And the first day they go with the family, walk with the student to school, meet the student, the family at the bus stop if that's the case, walk them through the first day of school, give them a tour, give the parents a tour of the school, introduce the parents to the teacher and the staff. Our staff is so important. Our secretaries and attendance guides are very important, that parents meet them as well. So then we'll also go and look at that at home again, making sure that the parent understands how to access the portal, how to set up an email account. We'll make sure everybody gets an email account and provide them with any supplies that they need at home at that point. But the important thing is that there's follow through. It's not, here's your new student, good luck, here's a few resources, here's a couple of web links for some information, and good luck. That's not like that at all. Phase 3, you can see here, is our ongoing, and this is all throughout the entire year. And then we'll also check back up on them in the future years to just kind of check in and see how they're doing. We monitor the student first weekly, then monthly, and reviewing with them the progress that they're making, any problems that they encounter, and then communicate with the family on a regular basis, making sure that the parents have what they need. Also giving them access to our community, our family and community centers that we have throughout the district in various schools. And they're not in every school we have, but there's one close to every student. There's a school that's nearby that does have a community center where they can go and have access to things like computers or other resources if they're looking at things. Counselors are available, social workers, school psychologists, And we connect families with other families so that they can start to build their network and work with each other and lean on each other. And sometimes it's a carpool situation, or I'll watch your child if you'll watch mine while they go to the doctor, or they build this network and working together. We also will document all of the contact made with the students and with our parents. We have a great program that we use called Elevation that we can keep our documentation in, and then notify the director if there's any other concerns so that we can take care of it in a speedy manner. This is all for elementary, and our junior high and secondary, you can see junior high and high school are very similar. Where it changes a little bit is in the first day of school. It's no longer a classroom. You have actually 7 or 8 different teachers now. And so the student needs to meet all of those teachers. And that's when we would arrange for a peer escort, or what we call a student ambassador, to walk with a student to and from classes, sit with the student at lunch so they're not sitting by themselves, introduce them to their friends, because that social aspect is so important. And more than anything, we want the students to feel that sense of belonging. We all know that academics or achievement cannot take place until a student feels that they belong. And so Tumaini is a big way that we do that. We take care of other things, other refugees through the Language Academy at Cottonwood High School. That's the classes that are geared just for the success of our refugees and newcomers. The Jumpstart Summer School Program, as mentioned, is a 6-week course, Monday through Thursday, for half a day, 8:30 to 12:30, where we have teachers there to teach some of the core classes and some of the electives that are very popular for our kids to take. And again, to either make up credit recovery, or jumping ahead to get credits towards their graduation. All of this is going to help with their English. All of this helps with their culture. And more than anything, there's that belonging again, because they're with a whole bunch of kids together doing the same thing after the same goal. And then that share house is there. I think that's about it. Of course, working towards the legislature, like we had just recently, we did go and support the representatives in the legislature to make sure that we got our House bill passed, making sure that all students in the district, in the state, have access, equal access to the education and translation interpretation part of schooling. And so I think that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to take questions. In the meantime, I just want to leave you with the fact that, and I can stop sharing the screen, I guess, is to let you know that our students are being taken care of. And the best thing I think that we can do, or anybody can do, for refugees, most of our refugees, by the way, are coming in from Afghanistan, and recently we've got them coming in from the Ukraine as well, but they do come from everywhere. And like I said, our top languages are across the globe. So the best thing we can do is to take them and make them feel welcome and loved, and give them that sense of belonging, and do what we can to help them get their foot nice and solid on the ground to get through the educational system, but more importantly, to give them access to the equitable education that they deserve. I appreciate your time, and thank you so very much. And I appreciate working with the IRC and the CCS. They've been amazing to work with, and I was really happy to be part of this today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. It's always really exciting to hear about the great work that's going on in Utah and the legislation that was passed earlier this year to support those new students. So at this point, I would invite all the panelists to come back on camera, and we can perhaps work through the few questions that I see here. We'll end the recording at this point so that we can have some open discussion if needed on some of these different points that we shared today.